and welcome to PJFM in Conversation. My name is Olivia Antsis, and I'm the Executive Artistic Director of Philadelphia Jewish Film and Media, formerly the Gershman Philadelphia Jewish Film Festival. Billie Mintz, it's so nice to meet you. Welcome to PJFM in Conversation, and thanks so much for sharing this enthralling documentary with our audience.
Thank you. I am thrilled and honored.
So where are you joining us from tonight?
I am based out of Los Angeles, but I am from Toronto, from a Reformed Jewish community. Grew up in a very, very Jewish neighborhood. Parents were advisors of the youth group, working with the rabbis family. I grew up with the rabbis family, the Cantors family. I feel like my great-grandfather is my great-great-grandfather is buried on the Temple Mount in Israel. They moved over to Israel with Herzl in the days of early Zionism, and so I have deep family roots in Israel, and they've been there for a long time, long before Israel became Israel.
That was probably the most comprehensive answer for where are you joining us from tonight?
Well, it was a lot of the genesis of this film was like, I wanted to make my Jewish identity movie because I have not really been able to. The closest Jewish film I made was about Jesus. I made a film about Jesus. I was fascinated with born again Christians, and how like I grew up as a Jew thinking that anybody who believed in Jesus was crazy. So I kind of wanted to like look into that world. But I was always like shunned away from the Jewish film festivals. So I wanted to make a film for Jewish film festivals. And that's what this is. This is my Jewish film festival movie.
Well, I wish you a lot of luck. Hopefully we'll get a lot more Jewish film festivals learning about your film with this screening.
This has been a Jewish film festival darling. We won the Jerusalem Jewish Film Festival. We've opened up a couple other festivals. So, I mean, obviously we had much more ambitions for it being in screenings because I wanted to go and do the Jewish film circuit. That was my big dream to do Jewish film festivals, because I was always like, I always missed out on that. And then the pandemic hit, and now, I didn't get to go to one.
Oh, that's so sad.
I know, sad story.
Well, hopefully when people start coming back to theaters, you'll be able to bring back this film and, come join us in Philly in person. So
yeah, I've got a new Jewish film I'm making right now. So I'll be back. I'll be back on the circuit.
All right. Well, why don't we begin? For those out there watching who haven't seen it, can you set up this story for them? Can you share with us your elevator pitch?
Well, I guess I was approached by a camera assistant of mine, a really wonderful person, and he was working with me on another film. And he said, I got this unbelievable story about my grandfather. And I was like, yeah, okay, tell it to me. I was like, okay, I get this a lot of people pitching me stories. And he told me the most unbelievable story about his grandfather was a pretty well-known artist out of Russia, and they had to leave there because of anti-Semitism. And then he went to move to Israel with his whole family and started working with another artist who basically took credit for all of the grandfather's work. And this is something that's haunted Roman his entire life. And he wanted to go confront this artist and see the artwork that thousands of pieces of art that was claimed as somebody else's art. So that's what this film's about. This is a coming of age story of a young Jewish man who goes to confront, the trauma that 3 generations of immigration and exploitation and anti-Semitism created under this, career of an artist. And it's kind of a thriller. It's a thriller.
Mm-hmm. That's how you feel watching it. I think that's how I felt. So I actually want to begin with the first words spoken in your film. And they're said by Oz in a voiceover that plays while he's painting this lettering onto some German signage. And he says, and I quote, "Artists are like gods, you know, they create out of piled dirty shit something to be proud of or not." So this line is pretty memorable, but what inspired you to begin your film with this line, and what did it mean to you at the time?
Well, I do have to, just make sure that we're all aware of that. Filming is a collaborative process, and especially once you finish this entire movie of shooting, you then hand it over to other really brilliant people, including my editor, Michelle Francis, who I love dearly. She's such a pleasure to work with. She is my co-creator for sure. I wouldn't have the movies I have without her co-authorship for sure. But I will say, when you quote Oz, like, I smile because I love Oz Almog. I think he is the most colorful, insightful, creative. I mean, he's the antagonist of the story, and he comes across as a pretty scary and somewhat unlikable person. But that's also, movie making as well. He is an incredibly likable person. He plays a great antagonist, and he does that on purpose. And he didn't know that he was the antagonist of the movie. But he plays an antagonist because he likes to scare people, etc. So he's just so insightful. He's such a smart. He's a genius, and he says the most amazing things. He also says, like, very terrible things too, which I didn't put in the movie, because he just talks, and he says stuff that is like, that would cancel anybody in this day and age, and should. He's very unpolitically correct. But the pile of shit is like what was left behind. So it's like, kind of like, he sets the whole stage with his his insight of, like, you're about to watch, like, art come from a pile of shit, and it's all a pile of shit. What happened to Vladimir, what happened to Roman's mental state that led him to this adventure. It's just what happened to what happens to Oz in this film is a pile of shit. I mean, he was very, very upset, as he should have been, and so it's kind of like his, like, foreshadowing and his insight into things that he didn't even know, like, because he didn't actually know what the movie was about. So it was just a great, he's very cryptic, and little did he know was that he was being cryptic about his own movie and about the trajectory of what his life was to become from doing this film.
My second question is actually right in line with some of the things you just mentioned. In planning your doc, or even during the filming, you had really no way of knowing how the story was going to end. Yet, as the director, you're responsible to make sure that no matter what happened with Roman and Oz, that at the end of the day, you need to succeed to tell a good story. So how did you navigate that? How did you make sure that you had a good story no matter what?
Well, documentaries aren't as unknown as they come across to be, because as a filmmaker and as a storyteller, you have a structure to follow, and you identify that a lot at the beginning. You know what you do a lot of discovery at the beginning, a lot of interviews. A lot of the film is when you watch the interviews, then you watch the action. The interviews are all done first, and the movie is scripted from the interviews. And also, like, a lot of interviews are done before you even start shooting. Like, I spend a lot of time talking on the phone with my subjects, etc. And so I then construct what I think the script is, what I think the story structure, 3-act structure, and I become an expert as much as I can on these issues, so I can gauge and also have influence on where it's going, because you kind of have to have, you're kind of like the creator of this world, so you have to be like 3 steps ahead of everybody. And there's some seeding that goes along. And when I say seeding, is like, with Roman, I wasn't just his filmmaker, I was his mentor. I was like an older brother to him, and I was along with him on this healing journey that he went on. So I had some influence. I was very much, kind of pulling strings on that level. So a lot of this was like we pretty much knew. We didn't know what was going to happen, but we knew what the setups were. So I have, like, before I make a film, I've got like a pile this high of cue cards of like this happens and this happens. And when you see my wall, it's like I've got the whole movie storyboarded of what I think is going to happen. Now I know that Roman is going to confront him. I just don't know what he's going to say, but I know that I need to be there to shoot that. So a lot of this is premeditated, and there is a level of control that you have before you go shoot something. It's not just like you go follow. But that's also the magic of filmmaking and the magic of documentary, is that, if there's a suspension of belief or suspension of disbelief that in any movie, but the documentary genre is even more, because you think that this is factual. You think that this is nonfiction, but which is, you use that as part of the genre of storytelling. So you manipulate people even more in them believing that they're watching something that is completely truthful. But there's so much to unpack about what is truth, what is what is real that you're watching. And being this is a film about lies, I very much entered that world as a liar myself. As any good storyteller is a really good liar. So this was really fun for me to explore, the different levels of dramatization. There's dramatic irony, there's all these different things to explore. So I hope that answered your question somewhat.
It did, and it gave me a lot more to think about, because a lot of my questions have to do with some of the themes you mentioned. Like, I actually, nowhere in my questions do I have the word lies, but I do have truth, and integrity. And the whole time that I'm watching the film, I kept thinking to myself, how much as a director do you have to try to, like seed in order for the action to occur as it should and create the story in the world that you want. But, when do you cross the line and not have this be documentary anymore? Because I mean, the word documentary means, to document a story as it happens, at, the reality of the story, the reality of these characters, right? Like, I mean, documentaries are supposed to be nonfiction, right?
Well, listen, the only thing that is nonfiction, the only thing that is truthful is the truth. The only thing that is nonfiction is nonfiction. The minute you're making a movie, you start lying. I don't mean lying, maybe you start manipulating. Mm-hmm. So all stories are manipulations. And, there are different mediums for different truths. So cinema has never been truthful. There's the genre. Documentary is the genre of truth. So, but this is the film that, and I'm like, I'm the magician that shows the tricks. It's like I had to come clean. I had to come, because I was forcing somebody without consent to come clean. I myself am coming clean, because otherwise I'd be a hypocrite. And so, you have all these degrees of what untruth is. And so there was never a law. I never lied to Oz. I never told him that I wasn't making a movie about telling the truth about his life. In fact, I told him the truth. I said, I'm going to tell the story of the history of your artwork. And that's what I did. And I just didn't tell him all of the truth of what I know. But from everything, I mean, everything we watch, everything we consume, everything we read is all a manipulation of the truth. I mean, what's going on in the world right now, we're seeing straight out misinformation happening from, we don't know who to who to believe in, who to trust, because when you read an article, I mean, without being too cryptic, I'm working on another story right now where when you Google the subject of my new documentary, you see all of this this incredible stuff about her that is so unbelievable that you would think it's not true. And this is from like Washington Post writes about her, People Magazine writes about her, all these big newspapers write about her. And the reason why it seems so untruthful is because it is untruthful, because they're liars, and the press lies in order to tell a good story, because they will always choose the good story over the truth for many reasons. So nothing we see is truth. And if I'm one to tell you, you're being lied to. You're always being lied to.
All right, well, that's good to know. I mean, my husband always tells me I fall for the magic beans. So, I always try to see the good in everything in terms of like integrity, meaning, when you're telling a story, you kind of have like everyone's back. You got the audience's back, you got your subjects back, you're trying to do good by your story. And so that to me encompasses the truth. But anyway, sort of to jump off.
I'm sure there's a good Yiddish word for all of this. I'm sure somebody watching or in your audience knows what the Yiddish meaning of this is.
I welcome all of their comments, so I'll forward them to you. So I just want to know, how do you go about gaining the trust of your subjects? Because I know with Roman, you were sort of like a brother, a mentor, and you got him through this, but his family, who originally was very reluctant to even discuss what had happened to the grandfather and sort of felt shameful about it all, they ended up being pretty comfortable with you and open with you as well. But the most surprising, maybe not so surprising, because artists have egos and, Oz says so. So of course, he was open because he likes to talk about himself. He likes to discuss his work. But I mean, it's kind of incredible to watch him just tell these lies to you on camera. It's like the spiel that he gives about his work, when the context behind this whole entire interview is revealing the truth. And here he is not knowing that he's lying to the wrong person. So he's almost too open and too comfortable at this point in the film. And so how did you get him to the point where he sort of dropped his guard like that? And we even see Roman do this over the course of the film. He starts out very almost like scripted and stiff in terms of how much he's willing to divulge of his battle with this. But then by the end of the film, he's cursing left and right and like really giving you his real opinion about everything. And sort of the facade, the masquerade is gone. So talk about getting people to that level of truth.
Okay, well, there are different methods. Roman and I, we loved each other for sure, and we still he actually just asked me recently to officiate his wedding. Like
to the girl
huge honor. Yeah, they're getting married. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
So, but we also had a very amazing, just beautiful people. Some of my favorite people for sure. But we had a very tumultuous, contentious relationship while shooting, and a lot of the times, you're only seeing what we decide to show you. And with Roman swearing, I mean, he's swearing at me a lot of the times, but you don't see that because I get him angry. And so there are so many times, like if you watched all the footage, I'd say, you know what, Roman, I don't think you got what it takes to make this movie. I think I need to find another subject who will be more candid. So I think we should just probably stop shooting. And then he gets so angry at me. And then, so it's like I had to provoke him a lot in order to get like the performance that I needed. Again, it's all just like, in the end, we're telling a story and we're entertaining you. And we're using this unbelievable situation and these unbelievable characters. And I honestly thought that Oz would be so proud of this movie, even though calls him out, and it's, you know, it breaks the truth, but like, it's art. And to me, he's like one of my mentors as an artist. Like, I mean, he's just brilliant with his ideas. And, you know, yeah, he didn't paint those paintings, but he did come up with the idea. And that's like a big part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a brilliant idea, the whole him too concept, and the show was absolutely beautiful. But I mean, the art was amazing, you know, and it's just tragic. It's just tragic that people didn't know who was the person that painted that. I don't know. Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, but at the same time, no, but at the same time, it's like, is, you know, was that, do they care? Did the people who commissioned this work actually care who painted it? I'm not sure. I mean,
I only think a few would. Because I really do think part of this whole entire like art world has just created just it's almost like the brand has become more important than everything else.
Always.
And Oz
always, though,
was
always
the
the history of art has always been that. Yeah, it's always been that way. So why should it be different with Oz? Vladimir was able to raise his family with the money that Oz gave him. You know, the most famous artists, the richest, most famous artists in the world don't even touch their artwork. They have like scores of assistants doing it. Like Vladimir did it himself, but like Damien Hirst, you know, all these huge artists, they don't touch their stuff. So why does Oz get like any different treatment? The only reason is because he wasn't as successful as them.
No, because Oz is taking the credit for this other human who did so much of this one project and all these other series. But Damien Hirst, like, isn't he honest from the get-go that he has this team of other artists creating his work? Like, if Oz would have just said, you know, I didn't create this, then, you know, then he would be, you know, off the hook like Damien Hirst.
Yeah, that's the tragedy. That's the tragedy, is that not that he lied, it's that he was caught in the lie in such an embarrassing way. And that weighs heavy on me, is that I was the deliverer of this truth, and it did weigh heavy on me. I had much anxiety breakdowns. I got sick, you know, because, you know, it's fun in a story, and when we talk about the story, but when you're the actual one who's doing that, when you're like the executioner of it, it's a huge, heavy responsibility. And I tried to stop it many times, but I just kept seeing like, this is such a good story, and I would justify it by like, you know what, Oz is going to love this. Oz is going to love this, and that's what kept me going.
So, I mean, I'm going to get to the question that is on everybody's mind at some point, but you never answered the one question I did have about Oz. So, like, you know, was it just his ego that made him that open with you and share with you all of this, or, you know, what was it?
You know, as a director, you have to have a facet of skills. Some of them being how to shoot, how to frame, how to tell a story, etc. But the biggest gift that I believe that I have as a director is the relationships that I make with people. And then in the process of making that relationship is being able to capture that relationship with the camera, capture that connection I have with people. And that's my biggest gift as a storyteller. And that's, I think, what helps my films for sure, is that you're seeing their performance, and their performance on camera is their relationship with me, is how they're opening up to me. So that's one thing, is like, that's just to answer that as far as all my characters and in all my films, and why I get such good performances is because I know I connect to people, and I'm very passionate and present about their stories. And Oz felt that, because here he had somebody who was completely showed up, who was present in their life and wanted to hear about them. And you know, there's an exploitation there that I exploited that relationship without, you know, fully telling him what I was doing with it. But as far as how did we get Oz, you know, listen, his entire career, he never allowed that to happen. I don't know. I mean, that's what he says. I don't know how many people wanted to make a film about him. but it didn't take that much convincing to get him in the film, because he had this new exhibit. He wanted to revamp his career, and they had some people interested in him, and so he loves the camera. It's clear that he loves the camera. He loves the attention. So that part wasn't difficult. We just didn't tell him why we were actually doing it. We told him a part of what we were doing. So, but once you're there, I mean, he ended up telling me at the end that he thought I was stupid and he thought my questions were stupid. I mean, after he found out what I was really doing, and he just thought that I was unintelligent. And he actually revealed to me that he didn't like me. I don't know if that's true. I loved him. I still love him. I write him at least, I wrote him a bunch of times afterwards, just asking him to come around and say, hey, this could be good for all of us. Like, you really need to see this differently. But he never responded to me.
All right. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and do the big question. So what, like, now that this is out there and people know, the truth, has it affected his career? Like, do you know anything about what's happening and his reaction to knowing that this documentary is out now?
I don't think there's much of an effect on his career, because I don't know if there was much of at that point, much of a career anyway. So I think if anything, I personally think if he would have more collaborated with us, I think we could have really done something quite amazing together using the medium of truth. And we could have collaborated on something, and where he could have had, we could have done something and played with truth. I wanted him to, be a part of the film once he found out, and then we could actually lie in the movie what happened. I had some really good ideas about, I want to buy his art, I want to sell his art. So I don't know. I don't think people care enough. I know that it's screened in Israel, and I got a bunch of people reached out to me who knew him, and a bunch of other people reached out to me, and I could tell they were, they reached out to me under the guise of wanting to find out more information because they had some involvement, but I kind of felt that they were being sent by him. So there's still this cat and mouse stuff going on that kind of makes me a little nervous, because it's not nice to have somebody who you feel is trying to undermine you out there that you have wronged. And I wanted there to be peace, but I don't know what happened. I know that he had intentions to do stuff with his things, and I think he's embarrassed now, and which really troubles me, because I don't think it needs to be that way. I think there's, it's just truth. It's just truth. Truth is hard. Truth is hard to come by. Truth is a dagger.
It sounds like he did not burn these paintings, so that they're still safe. They still exist, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. He didn't burn them. I don't think he ever planned to burn them. I think he was just messing around with us, just being the bad guy in the movie, and without knowing what the context was. And I think I pushed too hard on the burning. I really wanted him to burn them.
What? Are you insane?
Yeah, because I'm a filmmaker and I'm a storyteller, and it would have been
that's sacrilege. Does Roman know that?
Well, I mean, that's another truth bomb here is that I knew that he wasn't going to burn them, but I didn't tell Roman that he wasn't going to burn them, because I'm a storyteller, and we had so much because Oz told us he was going to burn them. I created the whole story around him burning them, and then Oz all of a sudden said he's not burning them, and so I was like, what am I going to just? How anticlimactic would that be if I just told Roman, oh, by the way, he's not going to burn them? And so, again, it's like truth. Truth is a dagger. It's like truth will destroy a good movie.
Yeah. That
sorry to burst your bubble here, but you know,
you have completely screwed my head tonight. All right, but and one last thing about that specifically, the Jewish museum that showed that specific exhibition, the curator said that they don't normally show, such a massive amount of work from one living artist. Once she finds out that he actually didn't paint any of those paintings, how does that then affect her credibility? I was wondering.
I mean, that goes for a bunch of them. It wasn't just, there was a bunch of Jewish museums. And so she stopped corresponding with me when she found out about Oz burning the paintings. She lost interest, and then wouldn't really, because I wanted to go and film her and ask those exact questions. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the other Jewish museum, George Haber, he passed away. He was in a tragic accident after we filmed him, and so I didn't get to talk to any of the people and get their response. I'd like to hear her response. I'd be curious to hear what she has to say. In fact, you just reminded me. I'm gonna send it to her and see if she watched it.
Yeah, I was interested in that. Yeah, so I have a lot of the questions I actually had, you pretty much answered, but I did want to talk about some really cool scenes that I enjoyed. One of my favorite was when Roman interviews his uncle and his cousin about his grandfather, and he asks why it's so difficult for them to talk about Oz and his arrangement with the grandfather. And his uncle replies, it's because Roman's focusing on something that is uncomfortable for the family and his grandfather's memory. And then his cousin adds that talking about what happened to Oz makes her sad and makes her cry. And then she actually starts crying. And Roman responds to this comment by first apologizing for making her uncomfortable, but then emphasizing that it's okay to talk about suffering. And I was just like, wow, like that, I was not expecting that philosophical, like profundity to occur there. It's okay to talk about suffering. Like that just sounded like a very mature thing to say, but also kind of just so like disconnected from what his cousin and his uncle were trying to communicate to him. So there was this kind of disconnect, but also this maturity. So I wanted to know, just like when Roman watched that scene, like what did he think, like when he first shot it versus when he saw it in the documentary?
Okay, very, very lots to unpack there. This is a film of like so many layers and very philosophical and self-reflective. So first, they did not know the true nature of this film. Roman did not tell them they were making a film, that he was making a film about Oz. Mm-hmm. They knew that he was making a film about Dadushka, grandfather. Mm-hmm. So when Roman kept pushing about Oz, he was pushing it remember, we're just seeing clips, right, of like hours and hours of filming. So he keeps pushing them to Oz, and they're like, can you just stop talking about Oz for a second? Again, they're like taken by surprise. They don't know that this film is about Oz. They don't know that Roman had already been to see Oz. So that's one thing. To talk about suffering and to be sorry. I mean, this is a very Jewish concept, right? Our culture is based around suffering, and culture is based around talking about suffering and to bring suffering upon ourselves. So
very much about Russian culture too. Not just
sure. I mean, this is a Russian melodrama.
Right.
Yeah, this is a Russian I knew I was making a Russian melodrama when he was crying and his grandmother asked him, "Did you kill somebody?" I was like, "This is too much." And also, it's also a film about like the exploitation of people in order to tell a story, and how Roman was just so driven by the story. He's so obsessed with telling the story. And then I want to also tell you that she wasn't actually crying about Oz. She was crying about the grandfather, but I think we re-edited it to make it like she was crying about Oz. So sorry to
I mean,
hurt you there.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you could tell she was crying about the grandfather, but I think just, the conversation about Oz just like brings up the feelings.
Yeah, but she was actually talking about the grandfather just brings up the feelings. I don't even think we were talking about Oz at that point, but then
Okay.
we put it in the edit as if we were talking about Oz. But yeah, I mean, Roman and it's I think that's a very I don't want to speak for them, but it was a very damaged relationship. This film really hurt that part of the family. Grandmother loves it, but I think they were hurt. But we also like are dealing with like when all this was happening, Max was 14 years old, and Vladimir didn't speak Hebrew. So the 14-year-old Max was doing most of the negotiating. So I think that there's a level of guilt or involvement that might be involved in trauma that Roman sort of just brought to them without any warning. So so Max was offended for every reason. Like he was told he wanted to get involved in something that honored his father, and he's the one who had the relationship with Vladimir. His daughter had the relationship with the grandfather. Roman didn't really have that much of a relationship. He was the kid from Canada who somewhat embellished a story about his grandfather that wasn't necessarily true. Parts of it were true, but like Roman invented a lot of it.
What parts did he
Being a
invent?
storyteller, and well, he had very limited interaction with his grandfather, and he created this whole thing about Oz being a monster, which wasn't true. Oz was not a monster. He was a monster to a 9-year-old kid who heard one story about him and had built his whole identity around and his anger that he just had in life that really had nothing to do with Oz. He kind of put on Oz, and so in the end, this was really a coming of age story for Roman to like deal with his own anger and realize that it wasn't Oz that he was angry at. And so we see him physically in this film. We see him physically grow. Like he does not look the same at the end of the movie that he did at the beginning, because like, there was so much trauma that he endured from this generational trauma of being this Russian immigrant. Not being able to show your emotions, not being able to do that stuff, and then like literally being exploited by this filmmaker to be like, give me more emotion, I need more emotion. And so I kind of pushed him to the brink where it really was cathartic for him, and it cracked him open. He opened up the cosmic egg, and was able to get a great story out of it.
Interesting. So another scene that I absolutely loved, and then we'll just wrap up here. But the scene where Roman is watching the tape and he sees his grandmom lift up each painting, and then you hear his grandfather saying that, he painted 50 portraits a month, handed them over to the man who collects his work, and then puts his own name on them. So at this point, you as the filmmaker have a sort of wrapped around your finger, because we're as infuriated as Roman. And in fact, like now Oz is, our adversary as well, because, we're now on Roman's side completely. So at this point, was that your intention? Like, this is the scene that's just going to win the audience over? And then at this point, like all of the sort of the manipulations that I do as a filmmaker, they're going to be okay with that because now he's the villain. Like, I just want to know, was that your internal thinking there?
Well, that was the smoking gun, which we actually, we didn't really have proof that Vladimir was the painter until we found those tapes. And in fact, we didn't watch those tapes until like a year after we got them, because we were busy doing other stuff.
Wow.
And so, yeah, we didn't even know what was in the tapes. Like I figured, we'd watch it, but we kind of just like, we got the tapes and we forgot about them. And then we were like, oh, what about the tapes? Let's just film the tapes. And so, we actually we got the tapes. So I knew what was on those tapes before Roman knew. he just kind of brought them out, and I was like, oh yeah, those tapes. I was like, yeah, give them to me. And then we watched them, and we were like, oh my God, this is Smoking Guns. And we went back to film Roman watching them, and to see what his reaction was. And so, as far as the manipulation of storytelling, like, there were two interviews that I did with Roman. One interview, he was allowed to mention Oz's name. The other interview, it was just the man. So that, because at the beginning of the movie, so that was all constructed beforehand as far as my technique of how to tell the story was, we didn't know Oz was the man. We're just listening to Roman talk about the man, and then we're watching Oz, not putting it together until those tapes. And then it's like, Oz is the man. And so that was all very deliberate. That was engineered. It's like everything was reverse engineered. It's like we knew what the ending was, and so we had to, like, okay, when can we talk about Oz? When do we talk about the man? So there was just a lot of thought that went into that, and that's sort of the manipulation that I'm talking about. Is like, there's still, even though you're telling a truthful story, you still have to have technique. You still have to have a structure to telling a story. And I think the more you tell stories, and the more you make films, the more you become masterful at it, just like a painter. And it's so, like, I'm coming towards 50. I'm 50 years old. I've made 7 movies now. And it's like, as an artist, so that's where I see Oz. Oz is my senior. He's maybe 10 or 20 years older than me. And, he's very masterful at what he does and how he tells stories, etc. And it's like, I kind of like, this is my art movie. This is my artistry, is like, it's just becoming masterful at what you do. And I'm very excited about that. And I'm excited to make more movies, knowing what I know now more than what I knew before I started this movie. And it's just a fantastic journey as an artist to go down and to become more wise with what you do.
So you definitely don't agree with Oz's statement that art before 60 is bullshit.
I would say that you have to do a lot of bullshit before, but I think Oz, that was a confession of Oz, right? Like, he was just confessing. And so Oz and I are different that way, where Oz didn't have the now Oz is a brilliant painter. So let's like, we didn't put that in necessarily in the film, but he's actually he's probably a genius when it comes to painting. I was told by another painter that he's literally like, almost like, I guess representation. He's like a is savant the right word? I don't know. It's like, he's actually like probably one of the most brilliant painters in the world. He has a mathematical mind. He can recreate. I was told that he can replicate like the masters, and he can do it like you wouldn't even know the difference. So it's not that Oz doesn't have the talent. I think he's like a prodigy. He probably has that ability. He just didn't want to. He was like, why do I need to do this? I'll get somebody else to do this. He could probably maybe even paint better than Vladimir. But he was busy doing other things. He didn't want to do that. Where me, it's like, I'm, boots on the ground. It's like, so it's not bullshit for me. I mean, I had to make a lot of bad stuff to start making good stuff, but like, I put in the time, I put in the work. I'm a slave to my art. So that, I think that's the difference. But I think Oz was just confessing, where it's like, everything he did before he was 60 was bullshit, because he was bullshitting. He got his MS. He's got his BS at MSU. His bullshit at make shit up.
Yeah, exactly. It did really sound like that was his way of sort of justifying all of the sort of not lies.
Malarkey.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was really wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much for all of this background of movie making and the making of your story in particular. I hope that everyone out there watching will tell their friends to go see Portrayal, tell them what a exciting thriller of a documentary it is. Yeah, and please keep in touch with us and let us know what you hear if you get in touch with this curator of the Him Too show. Yeah, but thank you again for sharing this film. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, it's been very fun. Thank you for the philosophical time.